Joseph Paul Jernigan, August 5, 1993. Jernigan was convicted of cold-blooded murder in 1981 and given the death penalty for the killing of 75-year-old homeowner Edward Hale, who caught Jernigan and his accomplice Roy Lamb breaking into his house. Before his last request for pardon was turned down, Jernigan served 12 years in prison. At the insistence of a prison chaplain, he consented to provide his body for medical or scientific purposes. Following his execution, Dr. Vic Spitzer and colleagues sectioned and photographed his body for the University of Colorado School of Medicine and the Visible Human Project. In addition to appearing on the British video game TV series Games Master's Gore Special, he is the focus of the HBO documentary Virtual Corpse. Jernigan had no last words. In 1991, Lamb was granted release after entering a guilty plea to murder and serving a 30-year sentence. David Lee Holland Sr., August 12, 1993. For robbing and killing the manager of a Port Arthur savings and loan office in July 1985, Holland received a death sentence. Holland, who worked as a bank branch security guard for 8 years, was found guilty of killing the office manager, Helen Bernard, 29, during the robbery. After being led into the bank's vault, Miss Bernard and a 23-year-old teller named Diana Jackson were shot with a .45 caliber handgun. $8,000 were taken during the heist. He was also accused of killing Jackson, but he was never put on trial for her murder. A video recording of the heist was used to identify him. He didn't have any last words. Carl Eugene Kelly, August 20, 1993. After robbing a business, Carl Kelly and a co-conspirator dragged Stephen Pryor, the cashier, into his vehicle. David Riley, another male, had fallen asleep in Stephen Pryor's vehicle. After being driven to a far-off place, the two men were shot dead and thrown off a cliff. Kelly's last words were, "I'm an African warrior born to breed and born to die. I'm an African warrior born to breed and born to die." Ruben Montoya Cantu, August 24, 1993. Around 11:30 p.m. on November 8, 1984, Ruben Cantu, then 17 years old, and his companion David Garza, then 15 years old, broke into a vacant house that was being built in San Antonio at 605 Brick Street and robbed two Hispanic men while holding them at gunpoint. A water heater had just been taken from the building site, so Pedro Gomez, 25 or 35, and Juan Moreno, 19, the two victims, had been workers sleeping on the floor mattresses to protect the location from intruders. At the time of the crime, the two victims were sleeping in their work clothes and had cash in their pockets. The men were robbed of their wristwatches by Cantu and Garza, who were carrying a firearm. They attempted to collect their money, but Gomez interrupted them by trying to get a pistol from under his mattress. The boys shot Gomez at least 9 times, killing him instantly. The same gun was also used to shoot Moreno up to 9 times. The two teenagers ran from the scene, believing they had killed both males. Despite losing 1 lung, 1 kidney, and a portion of his stomach, Juan Moreno managed to escape the house and ask for help soon after the attack. A neighborhood officer, lacking leads other than Moreno's description of 2 Latinos, approximately 14 and 19, relayed a rumor from the hallway of San Antonio High School, where Cantu was in 9th grade, that 3 children had been involved in the robbery and murder, and that students were claiming Cantu was responsible for the killing. Garza, who was questioned shortly before his arrest, identified Cantu, stating that he saw Ruben come running out of the house, according to a detective's note. The key initial tri-witness, however, was Juan Moreno, the shooting survivor, who repeatedly identified Ruben Cantu in court. A decade after Cantu was executed, Moreno recanted his story, as did Garza. Juan Moreno claimed that the day following the shooting, police paid him a visit in the hospital, which is in line with police records. However, his injuries were so severe that he could not move and could not speak. In a follow-up interview 5 days later, Moreno was given a number of pictures. He could not name any of the individuals in the pictures, and Cantu's picture was missing. Detectives paid Moreno a 3rd visit on December 16 and presented him with a new set of 5 pictures, one of which did feature Ruben Cantu, who resided across the street from Moreno's workplace where the crime was committed. During that police interrogation, he did not name Ruben or anyone else in the pictures that were provided to him. No suspects were taken into custody and the case went cold. Cantu shot off-duty plainclothes police officer Joe de la Luz at the Scarborough Lounge, a pub close to Cantu's house, approximately 4 months after the robbery murder. Cantu claims that only after the officer threatened him and pulled out his concealed weapon, he fired at de la Luz, whom he did not recognize as a police officer. Cantu was armed as well. De la Luz claims that Cantu shot him 4 times without any reason. Because police had unlawfully searched Cantu's home, the case against him for the barroom shooting had to be abandoned because it was not prosecutable. Officer de la Luz survived the incident, and Sergeant Bill Ewell, a homicide detective friend of his, made the quick decision to reopen the murder case against Ruben Cantu. Sergeant Ewell sent an investigator to Juan Moreno a 4th time the next day, displaying Cantu's photo along with 4 others. Once more, Cantu was not named by Juan Moreno as one of his assailants. He did, however, give Cantu's name. A day later, Moreno, who was then an undocumented immigrant from Mexico, was picked up by a 3rd homicide detective who then brought him to the police station, sat him down, and showed him the same set of pictures that featured Cantu. Moreno successfully recognized the picture of Cantu as one of his assailants on the 3rd try. Moreno said years later that he was never shown a picture of the actual shooter and that the individual who shot him had extremely curly hair. Cantu's co-defendant, David Garza, has now acknowledged his role in the murder, assault, and break-in. He claimed that although he and another kid entered the house, took part in the robbery, and witnessed the murder, Ruben Cantu was not even his accomplice. Garza said that Cantu's classmate from elementary school was the actual murderer. When contacted by the Houston Chronicle in 2005, this individual, who has only been convicted of 1 misdemeanor domestic assault charge, denied any involvement in the robbery and murder. "I have been framed in a capital murder case," Cantu said in a note to the citizens of San Antonio shortly after he was found guilty by a jury of first-degree murder and given his sentence. Cantu said, "I was framed because I shot an off-duty police officer named Joe de la Luz." At the age of 26, Cantu was executed by lethal injection on August 24, 1993, 22 minutes after midnight, making him Texas' 5th juvenile offender executed. A piece of bubblegum was his last meal request, and he didn't get it. When asked whether he had any final remarks, he said, "No, sir." Ruben Cantu's case is one of the most famous in terms of the possibility of this being a wrongful execution situation. Richard James Wilkerson, August 31, 1993. Wilkerson, James Randall, and Kenneth Ransom entered the Malibu Grand Prix Raceway after closing time on June 30, 1983. Wilkerson, who was recently let go from the Malibu, asked that Anil Varughese, the shift supervisor, give him his last salary. Randall and Ransom stayed outside with 3 Malibu employees while Varughese led Wilkerson inside the manager's office. Wilkerson hit Varughese as soon as he walked into the office and told him to unlock the safe while brandishing a knife. Wilkerson used that knife to kill Varughese after he complied, stabbing him about 42 times. The other 3 Malibu workers were murdered by Randall and Ransom. With funds taken from the safe and Wilkerson's last paycheck, which he ultimately cashed, Randall, Ransom, and Wilkerson departed the Malibu. Wilkerson was put to death in Huntsville, Texas, on August 31, 1993. He was just 29 years old. His last words were, "I don't hate nobody. What I did was wrong. I hope everyone will be satisfied with what's about to happen." Johnny James, September 3, 1993. James was found guilty of abducting and killing 47-year-old Barbara Mayfield from BJ's Lounge at High Island, which is roughly 50 miles south of Houston, in October 1985. James used to work at the nightclub, which was owned by Mayfield. He shot her in the foot, then loaded her into the trunk of her car, drove her to a convenience store in Winnie that was about 15 miles away. He stole $300 and abducted a female clerk. According to court documents, James and essayed the store clerk after forcing the women to have relations with one another. Then he abandoned the two women on the side of the road after shooting them at least twice in the head with a pistol. The clerk lived. At 39 years old, James was executed by lethal injection. He declined to make a final statement. Antonio Nathaniel Bonham, September 28, 1993. Marie Jones McGowan, a 62-year-old business college instructor, was pushed into the trunk of her vehicle by Bonham on the morning of July 9, 1981. Bonham stopped on a remote section of road in southeast Houston after 4 hours of driving around when he essayed McGowan and abandoned her to die. Following the trial, his lawyer criticized the jurors' failure to take into account the fact that Bonham was intoxicated at the time of the murder, and he even expressed regret for it. Anthony Quinn Cook, November 10, 1993. While David Dirk Van Tassel Jr. was in his car parked outside his motel room, Cook and his accomplice Robert Moore kidnapped him. The law graduate from the University of Texas was in Austin for a bar exam review session. About 50 miles northeast of Austin, Cook and Moore took Van Tassel to a wayside park near Cameron, where they robbed him, took his car, and shot him 4 times in the head. Moore was sentenced to 50 years in prison for his role in the murder after testifying against Cook. While on death row, Cook experienced a religious awakening and came to the conclusion that he did deserve to die. He ordered a strawberry smoothie and a double meat bacon cheeseburger for his last meal. As required by law, he next took a shower and put on his own tennis shoes, a shirt, and a pair of state-issued pants. His last words were, "I just want to tell my family I love them, and I want to thank the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for giving me another chance and for saving me. That's it." Clifford Phillips, December 15, 1993. On January 12, 1982, Phillips went into LA theater director Iris Siff's fourth-floor office and demanded money. Following a scuffle, he managed to strangle Siff, 58, and took off with her car, pocketbook, jewelry, fur coat, and TV. Previously employed as a theater security guard, Phillips served time for the murder of his 3-year-old son. He was also accused of beating his daughter into a coma. He said that after Siff attacked him, he killed her in self-defense. His last words were, "I want to express my feelings regarding the mishap of the deceased Mrs. Iris Siff. That was a very unfortunate incident, and only God knows why it was an unintentional situation that took place. I want to express my remorse to the family and the discomfort and pain I caused in their lives. Only God will determine if I am truly guilty or innocent of being the type of person I have been drawn up to be by the press and media. I have given my wife the power and energy to be a disciple of Islam. I rescued her from a wretched life in Ireland. I thank Allah for sending her to me. Certainly murder cannot be an instrument of Allah. My wife is very devoted." Harold Amos Bernard, February 2, 1994. When Bernard robbed a convenience store in Galveston, Texas, on June 6, 1980, he killed 16-year-old Tuan Nguyen. On April 1, 1981, a jury found Bernard guilty of capital murder. His last words were, "God, please forgive me of my sins. Look after my people. Bless and protect all people. I am sorry for my sins. Lord, take me home with you. Amen." Freddy Lee Webb Jr., March 31, 1994. Webb was put to death for the abduction and killing of Leopoldo Cantu. The deceased's wife, Elizabeth Cantu, had just completed closing the restaurant where she worked as a supervisor when she and Cantu took a car wash in the area. The pair was harassed by Webb and an attacker who had them go back to the restaurant so they could take money out of the safe. Webb assured the pair that they would not suffer any harm. Webb and his partner in crime left Elizabeth Cantu tied up in the restaurant and drove Leo Cantu to a remote area in Corsicana where he was shot 5 times and left to die. 3 months or so later, Webb was arrested for robbing a convenience shop. When the murder occurred, Webb had just been released from jail for 11 months after serving less than 4 years of a 10-year sentence for violent robbery, larceny, and child essay. His final statement was simply peace. Richard Lee Beavers, April 4, 1994. Beavers kidnapped Douglas Odell and his wife Jenny from their residence in southwest Houston on August 18, 1986, and held them at gunpoint. In order to get money, he made Odell, 24, drive to other ATMs and the restaurant where he worked. After that, he forced Odell to kneel and shot him in the head while driving the pair to a secluded location in Galveston County. Beavers took Jenny Odell to a different place where he shot her and abandoned her. Despite suffering brain damage and losing her left eye, she lived to testify against Beavers. His last meal included 6 brownies, French fries, eggs, sausage, and French toast. His last statement was a brief prayer. Larry Norman Anderson, April 26, 1994. On March 28, 1982, Anderson was arrested for the murder of a local bar manager after being stopped for driving without headlights. State authorities discovered a hunting knife and bloodstains on Anderson when they pulled him over. When they searched his truck, they discovered a blood-stained knife, 2 bags of cash, and a blood-filled garbage can in the bed of the truck. After initially telling police that he had been rabbit hunting, Anderson eventually led them to the body of Zelda Webster, 28, whom he had stabbed 15 times before abandoning her on the road. He declined to offer a final statement. Paul Rougeau, May 3, 1993. On January 6, 1978, Paul Rougeau, his brother, and the third guy broke into the Stock Exchange Lounge in southeast Houston and robbed it. Despite his constant claims that he was innocent, Rougeau was found guilty of the murder of 50-year-old security guard Albert Wilkins, a Harris County deputy constable who was not on duty. A gunfight with police resulted in the death of Joseph Rougeau on the spot. In return to a 40-year sentence, their accomplice testified against Paul Rougeau and entered a guilty plea to murder. Rougeau did not have any final words. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.